Hi everyone, this is Broken Angel, and welcome to week 5 of Mark Bernay's one-year plan to learn to draw. Last week, I mentioned that I wanted to keep focusing on observation, perspective, and line confidence, especially with the new material starting in February. Like week 1, I continued practicing gesture drawings and perspective basics using various shapes. And since part of this week falls in February, I also began learning one-point perspective, doing Face Lineart Studies, and working on head construction with facial features. With that in mind, here's how the week went. For day 1, I drew 24 shapes, split evenly between tubes and boxes. Things started out a bit rough, but they improved as I went. The ellipses on the tubes could have been better, though the center lines helped a lot with accuracy. The angles were solid, but the width of each ellipse is still something that I need to work on. For the boxes, the first 2 rows were copied from Draw Like a Sir's example, and the rest were from my imagination. I was very happy with how they ended up overall, aside from the one box with a more extreme twist that didn't turn out right. Overall, even with that hiccup, it was a strong start to the week, and the progress was really encouraging. For day 2, I began with 3 4-minute gesture drawings, with a minute of observation before each. Throughout the day, I did a good job with exaggeration. The shape of the legs were a bit off, but still readable, and the upper bodies turned out especially well, with the torsos looking noticeably better. The main issue was that the hands for the second gesture were too large, but they were still pretty okay. After that, I drew 18 tubes and boxes with the same split as yesterday. The tubes turned out better overall, and the ellipse angles were still consistent thanks to the center lines. The widths were also better, though they still need some work. Most of the boxes looked good, and the ones from Imaginations are starting to show real improvement. I'm still working on the more extreme twist, and I only attempted one today. Overall, it wasn't as good as I hoped, but there was definitely some progress. For day 3, I wrapped up the last day of drawing shapes from Draw Like a Sir video. I drew 24 tubes and boxes again, and this was easily my best day for tubes so far. Most of the ellipses were drawn correctly in both width and angle. Some were still a bit off, but the improvement was obvious. The boxes were decent too. The ones copied from the video turned out well, but the ones from Imagination tended to be too wide on top, though not always. The twists came out pretty well for the most part, but I still couldn't crack the more extreme twist. If you know the trick to those, please let me know. Overall, it was a satisfying finish to the exercise, and I'll keep working on it in my own time. For day 4 and the first day of February, I drew a one-point perspective scene following another Draw Like a Sir video. I focused on drawing through the objects and keeping their 3D structure in mind. I added lines to the planes facing the viewer to show depth, and added roof details to the buildings on the right. The sidewalks were a bit wobbly, and the word in perspective was decent, but could use some more work. The boxes, both the one on the side of the road and the ones representing cars, turned out pretty well. Overall, this was a solid first attempt, and I'll be using Google Street View going forward as suggested. For day 5, I started with 7 2-minute gesture drawings, each with 30 seconds of observation beforehand. These were rough compared to my January gestures, since I had to cut the detail and structure I was used to in the longer ones. As I get faster, I should be able to bring some of that information back in. The poses were a bit stiff, but the proportions and shapes were mostly good. After that, I did 2 Face Lineart Studies, one of Fern and one of Stark from Fear and Beyond Journey's End, Season 1, specifically from right before the dance scene. For Stark, the eye and nose placement were good, and the shapes worked well. The forehead and cheek were a bit off, though I fixed the forehead later on. I started the hair by laying in the big shapes before adding details, and drew the ear after the first pass at the hair, with it turning out well. Adding the scar after the second pass really helped bring it together. For Fern, I started with the basic outline of the dangling part of her hair and her ear, both of which came out well. Her bangs were drawn at a nice angle, and the face shape, nose, and mouth turned out pretty well. The eyes were a bit misaligned, and the eyebrows were slightly off, but it didn't take away from the overall drawing. To finish it, I added the hair details, and they looked good. Overall, it was a solid day of drawing, though I definitely need to work on speeding up my gesture drawings. For day 6, I drew 9 different heads using what I remembered from the Loomis method, along with some facial feature ideas I remembered from Mark Brunet. It started off a bit rough, but I improved very quickly. The earlier practice with squares, circles, and ellipses really came in handy here. As I got faster, I started adding more details to each head. The main issue was that the eyes weren't always even when considering perspective, so that's something I'll need to work on going forward. Overall, this was a good baseline for the month, and I'm looking forward to seeing how much progress I can make. For day 7, I began with 7 2-minute gesture drawings again, each with 30 seconds of observation. These felt very similar to the ones earlier in the week, a bit stiff, with proportions that weren't always accurate. A few of them did capture the general shape and flow very well, but overall there's still work to do. As I get faster, I should be able to bring back the structure and detail I had in January's longer gestures. After the gestures, I worked on another one-point perspective scene using Google Street View. The buildings were slightly too short and the street was too narrow, but the perspective itself was captured decently. Drawing through the forms was a challenge, and the hidden areas were less detailed than the visible ones. I once again added lines on the viewer-facing planes to help reinforce depth, but avoided going too overboard with small details. Overall, I thought it turned out pretty well for a first week of learning this, and it gave me a clear idea of what to improve going forward. I'd say this week went pretty well, and I'm happy with how both January's final studies and February's new topics turned out. For gesture drawing, the longer ones from January ended strong, but I still need to work on speed and accuracy for the shorter gestures. The last rounds of tubes and boxes also came out pretty well, though I still need to figure out the extreme twists for the boxes. So if you have any tips for those, I'd love to hear them. The new February material had a solid start. In one-point perspective, I captured the perspective accurately, even if some of the longer lines were a bit wobbly. The Face Lineart Studies turned out well, with good line confidence and accuracy despite a few mistakes. For head construction, I was really happy with the initial results, but I definitely need to review the Loomis head structure and practice placing facial features more consistently. My main focus for next week will be increasing my drawing speed while keeping my line accuracy strong, and continuing to improve observation as the material gets more complex. If you're going through a journey of learning anything, or if you have any tips you'd like to share, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And with that, that's 5 weeks down and 47 to go. I'll see you in week 6.